Chapter 2. How Firm a Foundation. A man from Eatonton, Georgia, which lies about halfway between Atlanta and Augusta, called a while back and asked if I wanted to buy a little house I was born over 80 years ago. I drove over to look at it and consider his proposition. I decided against buying the house, but as the man took me through it, a few hazy memories came to my mind. A vague recollection of a smokehouse, a time when I was sitting in a horse-drawn wagon and a stack of firewood. I was only 3 years old when my nearly destitute parents abandoned the rural life for better opportunity in Atlanta, so my experience in the Easton was limited. It was in that house I was draw my first breath. My parents named me after George W. Truett, a great preacher and evangelist of the first half of 20th century, for whom the theological seminary at Baylor University is named. My family couldn't afford doctors and hospital, so when it came time for my mother to deliver, a midwife came and assisted. In fact, the first time I saw a doctor was after I went into the army. If I or any of my brothers or sisters got a cut or a sore throat, mother took care of us as best she could. In those days before modern medicine, her limited arsenal was sometimes overwhelmed. She could not stop polio from attacking my sister Esther before her first birthday, confining her to a leg braces, clutches, and later a wheelchair. And when my 6 years old brother JG was playing outside and a stick jabbed him deep in the stomach, my mother had no antibiotic to stop the ensuing peritonitis. They would soon kill him. That was before I was born, so I never knew Jay-Z, but Esther often talked about what a sweet, lovable boy he was, and what a great loss his passing was to our family. Rural life left many scars. 6 years before I was born, a fire destroyed the family home and all its content. Neighbors pitched in where they could, replacing clothes and toys, and the home was rebuilt. But with no insurance, the expense lay a heavy financial burden on the family. Esther later recalled hearing our father speak with pride about his success as a farmer, his corn and cotton, cattle, swine, and honeybees. But he did not have enough money to have her polio treated without help from Scottish Rite Hospital. He deepened his involvement in real estate after World War One as a land procurator drove up prices. But soon after I was born in 1921, boll weevil appeared in the field around Eatonton, and my father quickly went broke. Land wasn't worth the taxes people owned on it, and we owned nothing of value. Rather than perish, we moved to Atlanta, and my dad got a job with the Life and Casualty Insurance Company of Nashville, selling policies and collecting premiums. He earned so little money, however, my mother had to step in and become a family breadwinner. Every morning they drove off in his old Model T Ford to collect insurance premium from customers scattered all over. On cold morning when I was little older, he told me to go out and crank the car for him. That meant pouring hot water into the radiator. Antifreeze had not been invented, so we drained the radiator on a cold night, laying hot towels on the manifold, then turned the hand crank on the front of the car. Mom packed Dad a lunch of sausage biscuit and fried pies, and he drove off with his corn cob pipe on his mouth to see his customers. At midday, he would stop somewhere along the way, buy some milk from a farmer, and sit under a shade tree to eat. By that time, the Depression had the world in his grip, and many of Dad's customers couldn't afford the insurance he had sold them. Premiums were anywhere from a dime to $1 a week, money many people didn't have. So they paid in premium with merchandise from the farm. They would come home with eggs, chicken, country ham, sorghum syrup, or flour. That was his financial contribution to the family. The problem with that system was that every Friday the premium still had to be paid to the company. On Thursday night, I would help Dad prepare a report showing how much money he had collected. From the collections, he was supposed to take out his commission and send the balance to Nashville. How much did we collect this week? He would ask me. $60, I'll reply. That can't be right. Company says I owe them 75. So we would go through their figures again and come up with the same set result. And instead of adding the family cash flow, my father would borrow it from to pay premium. I never knew the father my sister described, a man realizing his dream and making decent living on the farm. The depression changed him, took the life out of him. Some weeks were profitable, but after Dad paid for the gasoline and repairs on the car, rarely was anything left. His failure as a businessman was not for the lack of hard work or desire to achieve. He would drive 5 miles to collect 25 cents premium, but he failed nonetheless as millions did during the Depression. My mother then began taking boarder in our rented home in the West End section of Atlanta. For $1 a day, a boarder would get a bed, and we would put 2 or 3 beds in each bedroom and 2 meals a day. We had only one bathroom, so the boarders had to schedule around each other. Our family, of course, got the bathroom first, with the children bringing up the rear. My 2 brothers, 4 sisters, and I took our bath on Saturday, rearing 7 children and running a boarding house with 7 or 8 more people left mother with no time to relax or to read books. She made all the boarders' bed and kept their rooms straight, cleaned the bathroom, and cooked breakfast and supper for everybody every day, including Sunday dinner. We spent much of her time in the kitchen, and I spent many days alongside of her shucking corn, shelling peas, setting the table, and washing dirty dishes. Almost every night, my mother received her reward, compliments on her cooking from the boarder. My mother never used a recipe. She had an instinct or an intuition that guided her through everything she cooked, from fried chicken to sweet potato pie. She salted and peppered her chicken and left it in the icebox all night before she fried it. The next day, she fried it in a big iron skillet with a lid. The lid spun the chicken as it fried and kept it more moist. After years, I used the same concept of marinating and cooking when I developed Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich. As with bathroom privilege, everyone else finished eating before the children took our turn at the table. Then we ate what was left, usually the wing, neck, or feet of fried chicken. If you ever seen a big platter of chicken passed around the table, you know that the breast is usually the first to be taken. For breakfast, we ate eggs, or country fried steak, or steak or lean, with hot biscuit and cream gravy. Everything is good if you have hot biscuit and cream gravy, go with it. We took to our school what was left from the breakfast table for our lunch, usually biscuits with egg or steak or lean. We had abundance of sorghum syrup, and we poked a finger down into the biscuit and poured sorghum in there for a syrup sandwich. I often thought how nice it would to have a sandwich on a loaf of bread from the store like other kids I saw. I monitored how well the family was doing financially by how full the cupboard was. When Dad came home with a 24-pound sack of flour and Mother had more grocery than she needed for the day, I understood that to mean things were going well. Just like we got a full load of coal to burn in the fireplaces. But when Daddy came home with a sack of coal, I knew they didn't have enough money to buy a truckload, and I worried. The cupboard never went completely bare. The boarders never missed a meal, but the pickings sometimes were dreadfully slim. Mother kept a sack of salted fish in the kitchen and served that for breakfast at least one day a week. During the tightest times, those fish might appear on the table again at supper. Or Mother might take a couple of 10-cent cans of salmon, mix them with some breadcrumbs and an egg, and make salmon croquette. Mother was a wonderful model of a hard worker, the first person up in the morning and the last down at night. In fact, the only time I ever saw her eyes close was when she laid in her casket, and the only time I saw her slow down in life was to sit and listen to the old-fashioned rival hour from California on the radio every week. That was her devotional time, sitting by the radio and listening to the scripture being read and to Charles E. Fuller preaching. Because Mother provided dinner for the boarder at noon, on Sunday she couldn't go to church, but she saw that we children got dressed and off to Sunday school and church. On Sunday afternoon, we might pile into Dad's car and he drive us down the McDonough in Henry County to visit our aunt and uncles. We loved to talk with them about politics. He would talk to anybody about politics. He was sure of his opinions about the New Deal and government assistance programs. In those days, families took care of each other. If your mother or brother or cousin needed help, you helped. Our family never reached a point where we asked for welfare, although the day would come when we would need the kind of help President Roosevelt was offering. On those Sunday afternoons, when we stayed at home, I sometimes asked Mother to let me bake a cake. I will find a recipe and follow it carefully, but I often needed something we didn't have, and I would have to either substitute or do without. For instance, I learned to mix baking powder into plain flour to substitute for self-rising flour. The cake sometimes didn't always turn out like they should with my substitutes, but I learned a lot about cooking and I enjoyed the trial and error. I also learned to clean up after myself after cooking. Like any boy, however, I didn't always follow all the rules my mother and father laid out. My parents had their own tools for discipline, castor oil, and leather strap. My mother gave me a dose of castor oil annually and another one whenever I got careless with my words or attitude. She prescribed one dose every spring as preventative, and I sometimes got a druggist to mix the castor oil with cherry drink to mask the horrible flavor. Then there was a time when I became a little restless, irritable, and non-conforming to the rule, and my mother would say, "What you need is spring tonic, sometimes to get your thoughts straightened out." Out came the castor oil from the medicine cabinet with a cherry drink. It did the trick every time. It would be a while before I thought about stepping out of my line again. My father was more swift and direct with discipline. He had a razor strap, and he didn't mind using it on us children if we sassed him in any form or fashion. He had no mercy when it came to punishment, and we tried to avoid it. I was afraid of him, but if I ran from him, I got even more lashes. Mother sometimes tried to intervene, but he wouldn't listen to her. Looking back, I believe that depression and the dad's inability to support our family financially affect him deeply. He believed the only way for him to prove his manhood was to rule the roast. We had to do as he said. He left no room for debate. To people outside of our home, Dad must have appeared to be a good husband and father. He was congenial and got along well with most people. I never knew him to cheat on my mom. He seldom used a cuss word. He never drank. He was Sunday school superintendent for several years. But at home, he was very hard on us as a family and on me as a kid. He appeared to take joy in lashing out at mom with his tongue. I know now that our situation was not unique. Just because a family is a Christian and goes to church, everybody lives under one roof doesn't mean they don't have a lot of problems. I teach Sunday school for 13 years old boys, and each year I ask them, what one thing would you change in your home if you could? The answer I hear more than any other is, I will stop the arguing. Children want to grow up in a peaceful home. When they don't, the consequences can last a lifetime. One boy I visited would not let me into his house because the walls were scarred from where mother and father threw pots and pans at each other, and this boy later ended up in the jail. Because of my family financial situation, mother was often on the lookout for large house or cheaper rent to keep down our expenses. We moved at least half a dozen times during my childhood, staying primarily on the south side of Atlanta. When a boarder moved out of the house, we immediately put up a sign in the front yard, "Boarder wanted." Groceries represent another huge expense that had to be monitored carefully. We ran a charge account at Roger Grocery at the corner of Oak and Ashby Streets. Almost everybody did. And mother paid weekly or monthly depending on how money was coming in. A woman who lived on our street generated income by selling cupcakes from her front yard for a nickel, and few times I had an extra nickel, I would buy one from her. I learned fast during the Depression, though, that if I wanted a nickel, I would have to earn it. Some people think I am penny pincher today, but when you grew up in a family and in a time where every dollar must be stretched as far as you will go, you learn to watch where your money go. I was 8 years old when I decided it was time for me to earn my own money. So I started selling Coca-Cola door to door. I realized that I could buy 6 Cokes at a grocery store for a quarter, sell them for a nickel each, and recognize 5 cents profit. That was beginning of life in the business world for me. Knocking on people's door and asking them to buy a Coke from me demanded an awful lot of courage. As a little boy, I had a speech impediment so severe I could not pronounce my own name. My mother wrote my name on the card so that if I had to introduce myself to a stranger, I would let them read it. I remained tongue-tied for years and as a consequence was quite shy. As I grew, I had to make myself step out of the timidly. When I got to the point of giving more than 100 public speeches a year, I saw how the Lord took one of my greatest weaknesses, my earlier difficulties in speaking clearly, and used to magnify His purpose. The lady who lived across the street from us represented my target market in Coca-Cola business. Every afternoon, she came out onto her front porch and sat in a rocking chair with a Coke in her hand. She and the potential customers like her also understood that they could buy 6 Cokes for a quarter, so I had to offer an incentive to buy mine. One afternoon, a neighbor told me, Truett, we'll buy more Coke from you if they're iced down. So I ended up door-to-door sale and built a Coca-Cola stand in front of my yard. My mother helped me nail a few 2x4s together, and the Coca-Cola company gave me a tin sign attached to it. We built a litter box around the top of the stand. Mother put a pot of petunias that trailed down and bloomed all summer. So she didn't want the front yard to look so bad. Then I chipped some ice from the icebox in the kitchen to cool my drinks and opened up for a business. My market shifted from women on her front porch to insurance salesmen on the other thirsty people coming down Oak Street. Business grew, and soon I was buying cases of 24 Cokes for 80 cents directly from the Coke truck. The double profit to 40 cents per case. I expanded a line of new grape and orange crush, and mother convinced me to buy my own ice from the Iceman instead of chipping what I could from hers. The Iceman came down the street in his horse-drawn carriage selling 25-pound block for 80 cents. If the block was broken, he'll give it to me free. Soon, I decided to earn enough money to buy my first bike. I paid Warren McLoy, who lived down 3 doors from us, $4 for it. I didn't have fenders, but it had a good frame and would get me where I need to go. I never bought anything in my life that I appreciated more than the bike. In winter, I continued to generate my own income by selling magazine subscription door to door. I sold Ladies' Home Journal for 15 cents a copy and made a 4-cent profit, or the Saturday Evening Post for a nickel, earning 1.5 cents profit. You can guess when I tried to sell the most. But if they didn't buy the 15-cent magazine, I quickly pull out another, and because of the 1.5 cent profit is better than nothing. I also helped another boy with his newspaper route. He was 3 years older than I, and I followed his instruction carefully. Even at the young age, I wanted to do my best at my job, and I did. My mind wasn't totally on business, however. When I knocked on the door of a house up the street, I met Jean McNeil, and my heart skipped a beat. She was beautiful. I learned that her mother made costumes for stage performers, and Janet had been singing on the stage since she was 3 years old. She had a real charisma, and I, with my speech impediment, was terribly shy. I immediately had a crush on her, and that I had never gotten over. I was a year ahead of her in school and never said anything to her about my feelings, and later we moved out of the neighborhood. I didn't see her again for 10 years. When I turned 12, I was old enough for my own paper route, and I carried the Atlanta Journal on my bike to homes around the West End neighborhood. I began to contribute indirectly to the family at that point. As I mentioned, most of the grocers allow their customers to keep charge accounts. But sometimes mother would ask me to buy a few things, and instead of charging them to my parents' account, I would pay for them myself. I saw every week that my father still contributed nothing financially, and mother needed my help. The little bit I offered, however, could not keep the debt from growing.